Welcome to Solo Stories number 20, Camping in Appalachia by J.Meeks. Lock the doors, close the curtains, and settle down for another creepy story. The Appalachian Mountains hold secrets that can turn a simple camping trip into a nightmare. Four lifelong friends, bound by childhood memories and college days, sought adventure beneath the watchful gaze of ancient peaks. Every year, they carved out time from their busy careers to embark on an annual camping trip, exploring some of the most beautiful places in America. This year, their destination was the mysterious Appalachian Mountains. With excitement and anticipation, the friends coordinated their trip and embarked on an epic road journey to the eastern part of the country. They were thrilled to be together again, ready for fun and relaxation. But little did they know, their adventure would soon spiral into a chilling nightmare. After arriving at their destination, the group parked their SUV and gathered all their gear. Everyone checked each other's backpacks and went over the list of items, making sure they had everything they needed for their hike into the mountains and their camping site. The four friends began their trek into the enchanting Appalachian Mountains. One of the friends had acquired a general map of the trails and had circled a few spots that might be good to set up camp. The forest welcomed them with open arms, its verdant canopy dappling the forest floor with sunlight. After a few hours of hiking, they found a beautiful place to set up their camp for the weekend. There was a little creek nearby that eventually runs into the main river in that area. The clearing was a good size to set up all the tents. They really couldn't have found a better place. A couple of hours later, after the group had set up the tents, made a fire, and everyone was in their camping chairs having a few drinks, a little smoke, and just enjoying each other's company, the whispers began.
Ever heard of the Skinwalker?
Chris's tale of a malevolent shapeshifter cast a palpable tension over the group. Chris told some urban myths about skinwalkers and the conspiracy theories that surround them. The girls were a bit freaked out, and they all shared stories of videos they had seen on TikTok about skinwalkers. The whispers of the mountains seemed to echo their fears, adding an eerie undertone to the night. I bet you didn't know how quickly a peaceful camping trip can turn into a nightmare. But first, let's enjoy the beauty of nature. Sunlight dappled through the trees, painting the forest floor in a mosaic of light and shadow. The campsite was idyllic, nestled in a small clearing ringed by towering pines. It was the perfect spot for some campfire stories and marshmallow roasting. Why are there not more people talking about the eerie legends that come alive around campfires?
Oh, come on, Chris. You always make it sound so much more dramatic than it really is.
But as the laughter faded, the conversation drifted towards local legends, tales whispered in hushed tones around campfires. As the fire dwindled to mere embers, an unsettling feeling enveloped the group. The once lively banter faded, replaced by an eerie, tense silence. As they retreated to their tents, each felt a chilling prickle of unease, a haunting sense of being watched. Nightfall descended upon the Appalachia like a shroud. Inside their tents, the friends struggled to find comfort, a growing sense of unease gnawing at them. The wind, now a low howl, carried strange noises that sent shivers down their spines. Did you hear that? Jenna thought to herself. While in her tent trying to get some sleep, she swore she kept hearing her name being called in a low whisper. Jenna huddled deeper into her sleeping bag, her heart pounding against her ribs. The story of the skinwalker replayed in her mind, each detail amplified by the darkness. Suddenly, she heard faint whispers, almost like a chant. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into the heart of the legend. The wind moaned through the trees, a low, mournful wail that left goosebumps all over her body. The forest, once a source of peace, now seemed to hold its breath, its presence thick with suspense. Skinwalkers have been known to imitate voices and whistling. In folk stories, skinwalkers are also known to shape-shift into animals, and sometimes even humans. Mark awoke with a start, a low growl vibrating through the earth beneath his tent. He cautiously unzipped his tent, peering out into the darkness. The forest was a maze of shadows, the trees looming over him like skeletal giants. Mark rubbed his eyes. trying to see better into the dark forest from his tent. He stared with intensity and swore he could see something just behind the tree line. It appeared to be very pale, with a humanoid body structure. Mark thought to himself, "It looks like it is looking straight at me." The figure's eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dark, sending chills down Mark's spine. He could make out its elongated limbs and the eerie stillness with which it stood.
Jenna. She kept hearing her name being whispered, but now it sounds like it is closer. The unsettling feeling she was having deep in her gut told her that something isn't right and that we are dealing with something supernatural or paranormal.
Terror shot through her as she fumbled for her flashlight, her mind racing to make sense of the eerie whispers. Someone or something was calling her name. At first she thought it was a dream, but as she lay still in her tent, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Jenna. Jenna. The voice was unmistakable, chilling her to the bone. Chris, jolted awake by a sudden noise outside his tent, lay frozen, listening intently. He couldn't place the sound, but it was enough to send a jolt of adrenaline through him, chasing away the remnants of sleep. His senses were on high alert, every fibre of his being screaming at him that something was wrong. He strained to hear over the pounding of his heart, the blood rushing in his ears. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a cacophony of sounds, the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, the distant hoot of an owl. But beneath those natural sounds, he could have sworn he heard something else. A low growl, guttural and primal, sent chills through his body. He fumbled for his flashlight, his fingers clumsy with fear. The beam of light flickered to life, cutting through the darkness, momentarily blinding him. He blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. And that's when he saw it. Just outside his tent, illuminated by the harsh glare of his flashlight, lay a sight that turned his blood to ice. A mangled carcass, stripped of its fur and flesh, its bones picked clean, laying in a pool of blood, and you can see a trail of blood, perhaps from the skinwalker dragging the animal through the leaves. The eyes, vacant and staring, seemed to lock onto his, filled with an accusing glare. A scream, primal and terrified, ripped from his throat. He scrambled back, stumbling out of his tent, his mind reeling from the gruesome sight. He had to warn the others. They had to get out of here, and they had to do it now. The campsite erupted into chaos as everyone began to scatter, grabbing their belongings in a frantic rush. While everyone was grabbing their belongings, everyone was making comments about this thing that is terrorizing them. "It was whispering my name," said Gina. Mark jumps in and says he saw it as well, and this is no animal we are dealing with. One of the other friends said at one point during the night they could see the shadow of this thing walk right next to his tent. All four friends were scared and shaken with fear. They fled into the forest, their fear driving them in different directions, each one desperate to escape the unseen terror. Chris stumbled back from the gruesome sight, his foot catching on a tree root. He fell, landing hard on the forest floor. The flashlight slipped from his grasp, the beam spinning wildly before coming to rest, pointing at the trees. For a moment, he lay there, his chest heaving, his mind struggling to comprehend the horror before him. His screams sliced through the night, echoing through the silent trees. It was a desperate primal cry, fueled by terror and adrenaline. He scrambled back from the ravaged carcass, scrambling to his feet, his eyes darting back and forth, searching for the creature responsible for such carnage. Mark burst from his tent, his own flashlight beam cutting through the darkness.
"Chris, what the hell was that?"
He shouted, his voice sharp with concern. He followed Chris's gaze, and his own breath caught in his throat. The mangled carcass lay bathed in the cold light of their flashlights, a grotesque tableau that sent a chill down through his body.
Oh my God!
Jenna whispered from behind him. She had emerged from her tent, drawn by Chris's scream, and now stood frozen, her hand clasped over her mouth in horror. Emily followed close behind, her eyes wide with terror, her face pale in the moonlight.
We have to get out of here.
Chris gasped, his voice trembling.
Let's go now.
A low growl, guttural and menacing, echoed through the trees. It was close, too close. The friends exchanged terrified glances, their blood turning to ice in their veins. Amongst each other, they agreed that this is not an animal. Mark spoke up and said that he thought he saw it back by the tree line. He described to them what it looked like. Pale, large, dark eyes sunken in, long arms, longer than a normal human. It appeared to have no hair, and it walked on two legs, but would crawl as well. The growl seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, surrounding them, herding them like prey.
Right.
Mark shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. He didn't need to tell them twice. They were already running, their flashlights abandoned, their only thought to escape the nightmare that had descended upon them. The forest floor seemed to reach up and grab at their ankles as they ran, branches whipping at their faces, thorns tearing at their clothes. They could hear the creature moving through the undergrowth, its heavy breathing close behind, its growls echoing through the trees. Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in a blinding white light. Perhaps a thunderstorm was moving into the area. This would make the situation even more difficult than it already is. Chris, glancing over his shoulder, saw a fleeting glimpse of their pursuer. A skinny, pale, shadowy figure, moving with an unnatural speed and agility, its eyes glowing an eerie yellow in the darkness.
Chris!
He stumbled, his foot catching on a root, and went sprawling to the ground.
Jenna screamed, skidding to a halt beside him. Get up! We have to go!
Mark and Emily hesitated, their instincts screaming at them to flee, to save themselves. But they couldn't abandon their friends. Not like this.
Go, I'll hold it off.
Chris shouted, struggling to his feet. He didn't know what he could possibly do against such a creature, but he had to buy his friends some time. Any time. Mark hesitated for a heartbeat longer, then grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her away.
Come on. We have to get help.
They ran, their lungs burning, their legs screaming for respite. But the sound of the creature's enraged roars and screams spurred them onward. They could hear Chris screaming behind them, his cries cut short by a sickening crunch. That crunch was Chris's life being cut short from this monster that was hunting them down. Tears streamed down Emily's face, but she didn't dare slow down, not even to look back. They burst out of the tree line and into a clearing. Ahead of them, bathed in the pale moonlight, lay a dirt road. Salvation. But their relief was short-lived. The creature emerged from the trees behind them, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. They couldn't believe it actually came out of the darkness of the forest. It was closer now, its features becoming clearer in the moonlight. A grotesque mockery of a human face, contorted in a rictus of rage, its teeth bared in a feral snarl. Its body had no hair, was as pale as a ghost, unusual long arms, and its movements were jerky, almost glitchy. Its demonic eyes glowed under the moon's light. It was terrifying. Mark and Emily exchanged a look of sheer terror. They were trapped. There was nowhere left to run. Mark gently pushed Emily towards the road, his voice a ragged whisper.
Run. I'll hold it off.
A surge of desperate love filled his heart. He knew it was a hopeless act, but perhaps it would grant Emily a few precious moments. As the creature lunged, Mark closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable. The creature snatched Mark off of his feet, throwing him towards the tree line. He heard Emily scream his name, but he didn't turn back. The creature snapped Mark's neck and had proceeded to start eating Mark. The creature stops and then drags Mark's lifeless body into the dark forest. Emily ran until her lungs burned. The memory of Mark's sacrifice drove her forward. The image of the creature haunted her steps. When she finally stumbled onto the main road, she collapsed. Tears streamed down her face. She had survived. As dawn broke, Emily rose unsteadily to her feet. She was alone. The creature had vanished back into the darkness. The memory of that night remained etched into her soul, a darkness that whispered of ancient evils. And sometimes in the dead of night she could almost hear it. A low growl, a whisper on the wind, a reminder that some nightmares never truly fade away. As the first light of dawn broke through the dense canopy, Emily found herself alone on the main road. The memories of the night clawed at her mind like relentless phantoms. She had survived, but at what cost? The fate of her friends weighed heavily upon her. John, the bravest of them all, had sacrificed himself to save the others. Sarah, ever the resourceful one, had managed to escape the forest. Yet the horrors she witnessed left her forever haunted. Sarah would be going to therapy for the rest of her life after this hellish night. Mike, the skeptic, who had dismissed the legends and lore, was never found. Emily, the narrator of their harrowing tale, had survived, but at a great cost. And so, as the sun rose higher, Emily knew that some nightmares never truly disappear. The friends had set out for a weekend of fun and adventure. They laughed, shared stories, and made memories. But the forest had other plans for them, and now those memories were all that remained. Emily walked away, knowing she would carry the scars forever, but determined to honor her friends' memories. The forest was silent once more, but its secrets would never be forgotten. Thank you again for tuning into Solo Stories by J.Meeks. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the page. Thanks for flying with the Red Eye Hour, and we will see you next time. Be safe out there. Ha 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 ha!